Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Chicago, and my folks were pickers here in Texas. They're from Mexico, and um, my siblings all were migrant workers. But I wound up growing up after my family moved to Chicago, and then that was a big deal because my father got a job at the railroad during the whole
Mm-hmm.
Industrial Revolution. And then that afforded them a chance to have a fixed household. You know, if you read a lot of the early Mexican literature, it is about the experience in the fields.
Yes.
A lot about the migration. So my folks experienced all that firsthand, including my brothers and sisters. But I was the last of nine, the youngest, and when I was born, I grew up in Chicago. So by
Mm-hmm.
then, they were finished picking. We had a fixed address, a house, and I was
Mm-hmm.
able to go to school. So I'm the first male to finish high school of my family, and then the first to go to college. But a lot of that is because they no longer had to be itinerant workers.
Mm-hmm.
And then for me too, it was a big deal to keep studying. So I wound up getting my Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. So I wound up being the first Chicano to get a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from the University of Houston Creative Writing Program.
Mm-hmm.
And then I stayed. So that kind of, and I brought my family down here too. So I brought them back to Texas. And that I think opened up a lot of different opportunities than I would have had in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. What aspects of growing up Latino influenced your literature?
Well, I think for me, one big key has been always keeping connected to my community. And what I'm going to be working on now, as far as writing, is talking about cultural capital.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's key for folks, especially Chicanos, Chicanas, or Latinx folks, to understand that our community has a lot of resources and it is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk more directly about it as cultural capital. But for me, I've always kept connected with my cultural capital, even when I was an undergraduate, especially in graduate school. So not only is it the basis of what I write about because I am Chicano, but on top of it, now that I'm doing more of the activist work, political work, and now the intellectual work, it's going to be directly influenced by being Chicano because I'm going to break down the exact components of the power of our backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. Were there times when you were discriminated against that inspired you to write about your experiences?
I think actually, if folks go to my website tonydiaz.net, I have a blog on there called the Cultural Accelerator,
Mm-hmm.
and one essay that I wrote, it first appeared on NBCNews.com, is called our culture through our books, and oh yeah, it was surrounded by discrimination. Some it was overt, some I didn't know was discrimination, some were microaggressions, and then other days were just normal, regular days.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one key thing for me was being a kid translating for my parents and seeing how people would react. So it did two things. One, show me the power of language, because here I was a kid basically navigating for two adults, one who spoke English only, the other one who spoke Spanish only. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized it put me in a position of power. But also the I started noticing how people would act to my parents because of that, but I wouldn't put up with it. So I would call adults out and straighten them out. And so I was a little kid just
Mm-hmm.
taking risks, and I'm like, oh, okay, I can either stand up for them or not. I think I'll stand up for them. So it also taught me to stick up for myself and my family.
Do you remember a specific situation when this happened?
Sure, no, no, and I read about it in that particular essay. I remember we were, in a shop in a store, and it was an Anglo salesman, and he was looking at my dad funny. And then in Chicago, there used to be this expression um, where if someone looked at you funny, you'd say you got a bad eye, right? So it's
Bad eye, yeah.
right.
I've heard that before.
So then you weren't supposed to say it to adults, but I remember saying to this adult, you got a bad eye because I didn't like the way he was looking at my dad,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, I said to him, look at my dad funny because I'm translating, but You don't. He needs me because he doesn't speak English, but you need me because you don't speak Spanish. So you better straighten up, or we're gonna leave. And
Mm-hmm.
I was nervous the first time I had a because I had never done that, and you're not supposed to
Yeah.
talk to adults like that.
Yeah.
But I was sick of it, and I just got so mad that I lashed out that way, and it blew my heart was shaking, my feet was trembling, and next thing I know, the guy said he was sorry,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, wow, that kind of that kind of really opened my eyes to the power that language gave us,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, if we don't act on it, it'll escape. So.
Mm-hmm. So considering that you are also a professor for Mexican American literature, why do you think it's important for Latinos to learn more about their heritage?
Well, I mean, there's twofold. One, it'd be just all the research. So during the court case overturning the ban of Mexican American studies, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of Chicanos and Chicanos provided the research that they had conducted. Um, and, you've got Dr. Angela Valenzuela, Chicana from University of Texas. She has, evidence that proves that students who take ethnic studies excel. Dr. Nolan Cabrera, a Chicano from Arizona, he wrote probably the most exhaustive study about the students who were taking Mixed American Studies at Tucson Unified School District.
Mm-hmm.
And he quantified very thoroughly that the students who took Mixed American Studies um, basically before those courses, the students had double digit dropout rates. And I forget what they exactly were. Honestly, every urban city that has double digit dropout rates, to me, that's criminal. We shouldn't tolerate that. And then every school district will say, well, no, they say it's this much, it's this low. But again, no double digit dropout rate is acceptable. But once they implemented those courses, the graduation rate jumped up to 98%.
Mm-hmm.
And then the students were passing other courses, including science, including reading, and also all other tests. So the evidence was there, but then also I think just anecdotally, I'm an example of it. You probably know examples of people that once they read about their culture were empowered. And then literary wise, all you got to do is read the work of some of the writers who were banned in the course in Mixed Market Studies. Sandra Cisneros, first to go to college, read her culture. The world was open to it. So we've got anecdotal evidence, personal evidence,
Mm-hmm.
scientific research. You know, now I'm happy that people understand it as well. Now it's proven scientifically as well as emotionally. So it's about time everybody gets on board and spreads it.
Mm-hmm. And they feel like they are understood also. Like when they are like I know a few friends that were put in ESL programs when they came from Mexico when they were in high school, and and now that they also learned our culture, it's the same. Like they get to share it with everybody else. That's
No, I mean exactly, and it goes from being an outsider, understand that you fit in, but
hmm
then it goes back to cultural capital. You understand that what you bring to the table is powerful. But at the most basic level, like even when I was a kid, I'd hear the teacher say, "Well, you should write about what you know." And even when I heard it back then, I'm like, "Oh, you mean what you think I know?" Because if I tell you about my background or my house, you're not going to like it. You're not going to
hmm
give me an A. So I would. That's when I started writing fiction. I would say, "I think this is what you think I know." So I will repeat that, and and then I had to kind of game the system.
hmm how is learning about their heritage a path to success? I remember reading about that. You said something about that being a path to their success.
Right. I mean, there's several different levels. Everything from understanding that you have a contribution to make to society, that you value. I think also to understand that something like code switching is powerful versus, myself too. At one point when I was translating, I was embarrassed for a little while. I thought, I was embarrassed that I really wished my parents, were the ones that were making, the calls
hmm
and for a little while I felt embarrassed. So I can imagine what that feeling would be like extended over decades, you know. Um, and then I think the other part too is that it really is a human characteristic to want to feel that our voice matters and to tell our own story And I think that's unleashed once we literally unleash our voices. For me, once I read a book, first book I read by a Latino was actually a Boricua writer, Piri Thomas, Down These Mean Streets. But before then, I didn't realize I could code switch. I could write about urban situations and all that. And it really did free my voice.
Okay. How is your activism a part of your art?
Well, for me, I'm stunned that the world doesn't see those two things going together. But it goes back to the whole idea of what our community thinks of literature and what the mainstream world thinks of literature. And actually, very technically, what I'm writing about now is cultural capital and educational capital. Like when I was getting my Master of Finance and Creative Writing for educational capital, they did not want what they thought would be a lower aesthetic of political writing, so they reduced what our community writes to that. They revere titles, so they prefer literature that is written by folks with MFAs or advanced degrees or awards. And then it's funny too because even when I was getting my MFA, um, you know, if I did code switching, I did a crossover class in poetry. When I did code switching in Spanish, that was all of a sudden they were like, "Who's your intended audience?" But when someone code switched in French, they were totally fine with that. So even then, I'm like, okay, there's something going on. And then for me too, again, I've always had a connection to my community, which I knew was valuable. There wasn't a translation for it into the aesthetic system of the Master of Fine Arts and Creative Writing, but it allowed me to use it in a very practical situation. So I stayed in contact with the community even as I was getting my MFA. So I was the first to conduct writing workshops at the Center for the Chicano Family Center here in Houston, Talento Bilingüe de Houston, Mecca Multicultural Counseling for the Arts, different places. And I didn't realize that was activism at the time, but it was because basically I had agency to basically create these entities, and then later on it became more direct activism when we started opposing the banning of Mexican American studies in Arizona and demanding that Mexican American studies be implemented.
Yeah, and that's part of your Libro Traficante movement, right? How did what inspired you to do that? How is that important to the community of Arizona, and why is that important to you?
Sure, no, and I think what I would point out first is that the Libre Traficante movement was the tip of the pyramid, and the base is Houston's cultural capital. So we couldn't have led that movement successfully without the all the years of Nuestra Palabra behind it. So that when we were doing our poetry workshops or literary workshops, we didn't know we were creating an army of cultural workers, volunteers, intelligentsia, so that we had teams in place when they banned Mexican American studies. So when they banned Mexican American studies in Arizona, we knew what it really meant. It was so hard for us to get art and literature to the community. We knew that if it was banned at schools, that would really set us back. Also, we wanted to contain that ban to just Arizona. We didn't want it to spread like the anti-immigrant laws of Arizona spread. So we did that to contain it, one. And then two, we wanted to show love to the familia in Tucson. They suffered the most because they had kindergarten to 12th grade Mexican American studies. They should have been extolled. Instead, they were fired, maligned, sued. It was ugly. It was very ugly. So they suffered the brunt of it. And our job was to show them love, contain it, and let the world know this was going on. So it was myself and four other members of Nuestra Palabra, Brian Parras, Liana Lopez, Laura Torres, and then let's see, Brian Parras, Lupe Mendez, Liana Lopez, and then Laura Torres, and then myself. Oh, there were five of us that started it. But we had years of work in Nuestra Palabra. So we were used to doing the audacious. We had organized, and Isis was part of this too. We helped organize the biggest book fairs in Houston. We had done radio shows. So we had the audacity to do things, to dream it. We had the team to pull it off. Even at the book fairs, we had about 300 volunteers. So, Lupe Mendez knew how to manage those people. Liana Lopez was a genius at social media. And because of my communications major, I do like being in front of the camera. And I had the MFA, so it's also a little bit of the title to talk about writing. And we said if they were going to ban Mexican American studies, we were going to smuggle the books back into Arizona. So we got mad, but then we acted. That's what activists do. And then we organized in 8 weeks. We organized the 6 city caravan. $20,000 worth of books that were banned. We started 4 underground libraries, and we put that racist and American law in check, but then also make sure it didn't spread. So I think that was key because um, people need to know that we were banned. I mean, they banned our history and culture. And I mean, it's mind boggling that it happened in America. People still don't even know it happened. And it got overturned in 6 years, which is also mind blowing. Like, had that happened a generation sooner, we would have been debilitated. And worse, I firmly believe that if we had not helped keep it in check, we would have found out about it after there was a ban in Arizona, Mexican American studies in Arizona, a ban in Texas, a ban in Arizona, probably in New Mexico. We'd be fighting 3 bans, and that's
And it would just keep going.
And those are major disadvantages, right? This is very different because we kept it in check. And then just this year, we got Mexican American Studies endorsed by Texas State Board of Education, which I can say without a doubt, had we not started pushing back at Arizona, we wouldn't be celebrating that. And I'm proud that Texas is the first state where State Board of Education endorses Mexican American Studies. Other states like California, there are school districts that have endorsed ethnic studies, which is great. But this is the first state to actually endorse directly Mexican American Studies. So again, we went from doing poetry readings to that sort of direct activism, but that's the power of cultural credibility. And I firmly believe that's exactly what Arizona wanted to prevent, but too late.
So you haven't seen any improvement really in Arizona yet?
So it's good that basically there was a Chicano civil rights lawyer, Richard Martinez, and he was key in getting the litigation team together. We're talking about between $7 and $10 million worth of litigation force to overturn that law. So it's great that it got overturned. Unfortunately, the original class has not been reinstated. So that's right. So I mean, and it really is a shame because they were so ahead of the game. That one to me is the gold standard of Mexican American Studies, ethnic studies courses, because they had done it for 6 years. And so it's really a shame that they're rebuilding. A lot of the main progenitors of that curriculum have left Arizona, are doing consulting or in other states. We just had the 2018 midterm elections, as I understand it. They just turned one of their conservative seats Democratic, but now I'm hearing too that the Democrat who won is friendly with Joe Arpaio, which I have to check because he's a racist sheriff. And again, this is not. I want to make one thing clear. When I use the term racist, I'm not speculating. The court opinion, the legal opinion that overturned the law, the ban of Mexican American Studies in Arizona, said it was implemented with discrimination in mind and to people for gaining political power. So that's not me being emotional. That's a legal opinion. Secondly, Sheriff Joe Arpaio was a convicted racist. He got convicted for profiling Latinos. Again, that's not my opinion. That's a legal fact. Yeah. He got pardoned by Donald Trump. So for me, anybody who associates with Joe Arpaio, I'm suspect of. So I've got to look. I don't have a chance to research that. So I mean, it's good news, bad news. It's good news. It seems that Democrats have expunged, and I'll be honest. I'll be nice to Arizona. It seems that they've self-corrected. So the governor who signed SB 1070, the Show Me Your Papers law, she's out of office. She didn't run again. She signed the Anti-Ethnic Studies Bill, Jan Brewer. She's out of office. Joe Arpaio got voted out, convicted, again, pardoned, unfortunately, because justice should run its course. The superintendents of education who pushed that racist ban of ethnic studies, they're out of office too. So there's a self-correction that was going on. Yeah. And I say one thing, the people of Arizona are strong. They taught us how to stand up for ourselves. So I'll say that too. The people of Tucson were beautiful and powerful because they're in the belly of the beast. In Texas, they got to deal with us differently. It's just they're trickier. Yeah. The people in our president are just trickier. So I will say that the people have always been strong and inspired us. There were some politicians who did some terrible mechanizations. There's another fellow, Chris Kobach. He was an architect of the anti-immigrant movement for the far right, as well as the anti-ethnic studies movement. He lost his bid for governorship of Kansas. So I have to answer this question differently. I'm still thinking about the answer to that question differently this week than right before the election. So something's happening. I hope it's for the good. Um, and I hope it will lead to basically leaders who will do. I mean, let me give props to some Republicans. You had Texas State Board of Education, 9 Republicans and 6 Democrats who voted together to support Mexican American studies. That's cool, right? So to me, that's the epitome of democracy, where we can meet a common ground for the good of the youth. So I won't answer that question fully yet.
Okay. Um, so how would you categorize your work to fit into one of the 4 themes of literature, being language and identity, assimilation, acculturation, or feminism?
I guess language and identity, especially now that I'm moving from, well, my first large published work was my novel, The Aztec Love God. Since then, I've published a lot of nonfiction essays, especially to fuel the Libre Traficante movement, and to spread ethnic studies. I also wrote a textbook, the Mexican American Studies Toolkit. I'm doing TV now. So I think it's always language and identity, because throughout that, I'm still using those same basic rhetorical strategies that I picked up from Mexican American Studies, connected to my culture. And now I'm going to be writing about cultural capital and create a whole industry on that, which is all culture and identity, where the main theme is going to be to quantify our cultural capital, um, quantifying it, invest in it, and then accelerate it. And that's kind of what my new uh, plateau is. I want to work on talking about being a cultural accelerator.
Do you use any satire and or any allegories when you do your work?
I really like satire. My novel, The Aztec Love Guy, was a comedic novel, but even the video that we shot, I wrote the video and acted in it. Brian Paras, one of the other Libre Traficante co-founders, he shot the video and edited it. But it's satirical. I can send that to you too. But basically, that Lone Star Libre Traficante caravan. Some of the videos I shoot for Fox 26 Houston are satirical. Even in my political analysis, I'll use satire, um, and then also some of the essays I write are satire. So I do use a lot of satire, um, which I enjoy. But then I think with the cultural capital, probably a little more direct logos.
So that was the questions. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.